All right, good day, everyone. So I've been sharing some articles here on LinkedIn, and I do see a lot of impressions, which I don't know what that means. Um, I don't know what that means for LinkedIn. People are reading into the articles or just kind of perusing them. Uh, I'm just going to go ahead and take the stance that no one is actually reading the articles. So I decided to write a review on one particular article, and I'm doing it because it's fundamental to a presentation that's going to be happening at a particular exchange near you real soon. This is like for you all in HTM. So, um, just to get get another understanding of what the uh, the five-factor model uh, has to do with employee engagement. This particular article, which laid out a good foundation for the presentation you may or may not be seeing, it looked at investigating personality differences between employees, supervisors, managers, and entrepreneurs. And it did it across different different um, uh, organizations, different ethnic groups. This was done in the UK, but the sample size was huge. Um, and so I'm gonna get into this article because some of it actually made sense, and I think you would you'd be able to recognize some of the things we're going to talk about in this article. And I have a little screenshot there of the um, of the title of the article and the authors. Can we go to the next page? All right, so this is again just a cut and paste from the abstract. I went ahead and just put the abstract on here. Most of you don't read that. There's a lot to unpack in the abstract. I will say it's like the movie trailer of the movie. So if you don't want me to spoil how this particular research concluded and what they found, you probably don't want to read the abstract, right? And just read the article for yourself. Sorry if you hear vacuuming. I think they're cleaning up the offices right now. All right. So, what did these authors look at? So they specifically looked at personality traits to the employment status of individuals, and they did this by their whether they were entrepreneurs. And for those of you in HTM, I mean, it's like you small business owners or consultants, people who you don't work for an organization. We have plenty of those types of individuals in HTM. They looked at managers, supervisors, employees, and these are when they did the longitudinal study and what the numbers they got from the what's called the household longitudinal study in the UK. And there's a link to this site where you can actually go and look at the raw data if you want. Uh, these numbers were the numbers I'll say that they ended up with after a 3-year longitudinal study. They started off with a lot more, but it was about like 19,000 or something at the end. Maybe not 19. It was like, what is it? 50, yeah, 10. Anyway, yeah, it wasn't that many left at the end that they can actually pull from their data because they did want to do this as a 3-year longitudinal study. So they lost a lot of individuals. So I think they started off with like 49,000 total, and they ended up with something smaller. Um, all right, this is the analysis part. So I'm going to talk to you about what some of this means. If you can look at this in the article, all I did was just kind of give you an outline within the article, and I'll talk to you about how to read this, right? So a simple way to look at the information here, they did they found a multivariate analysis of variance within the data, and they did find a univariate variance effect on the data. So you have a MANOVA and an ANOVA analysis of variance, which they did, and the univariate factors being openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, right? They did each one of those traits, and they did find an effect on each one of those traits on the status of the employee, of the worker. And then from that, they were able to actually get a multivariate analysis where they looked at the effective status on personality traits across the entire spectrum, right? So this looks like a lot of information from the abstract, but basically what it's saying is the study, it looked at different personality traits. Those numbers that you see in the parentheses, that's a statistical test. It's called an ANOVA. It just stands for analysis of variance. And it's like comparing things uh, to see if they're different or how different they are. So that big number that you see, 172.51, that's the result of the comparison. And where you see that p-value, p less than, for example, 0.001, what that means is there's a very, very, very little chance. In fact, there's like a 0.1% chance that this result actually happened at random. So it's a tiny chance that this just happened by happenstance, you know. So in other words, this is like a 99.9% chance that this is reliable. So that's kind of what that means. So it just means that there's a real difference between the personality traits that are being studied. So this is actually really significant. Um, and so if you end up going to some kind of HTM conference or exchange and you go to a session where they're talking about the effects of personality. Sorry, I'm covering the microphone because I want to make sure that you can hear me. So I'm just doing like this. Yeah, so if you end up going to a conference or an exchange and you go to a session where they're discussing something called the five-factor model, and they're talking about its impact on employee retention or something like that, just know that there's a lot of background information and that's been done to show that there is a significant impact of looking at that personality five-factor model and employee success. In fact, I heard there was a really good video about this five-factor model on the analysis of the Bad Batch Star Wars characters. So I would look that up. So back to this, right? So when we get to the univariate effects, right? The information, we're just going to talk about one. And how it describes the statistical result that it's related to. So like, let's look at openness, for example, and we'll break that down. And you can do this, we'll do it for openness, and then you can do it for all the other ones. But I'm going to tell you what it means. So if you look at the one that says openness, right, it's a characteristic that was being studied. So we're just looking at the openness trait of the individual independently, excuse me. So again, in psychology, it refers to traits like being open-minded, imaginative, curious. I think we mentioned like even in the Bad Batch TV show, the leader has to be kind of open-minded, imaginative, curious, because they're always having to figure out imaginative ways to get their team from point A to point B, right? Things aren't always laid out for them like employees who have like very strict, rigid things that have to be done, right? So that's a good trait for a leader. But anyway, let's look at that trait as we're looking at it from a univariate analysis. We're just looking at it from an ANOVA. So when you look at that F and then it's a parentheses 3 comma 19502. Oh, by the way, 19502 is the number of um, of surveyees that they had left over for the longitudinal study that stayed after, I think it was like 49,000 they started off with, and it's like think they dropped down to like 29,000. It's in the article, but then with the numbers that they had consistently for all 3 years, they ended up with like 19,502 that uh, uh, server results that they could use because they had all 3 years of data for the longitudinal study for them. So just so you understand where the numbers come from. And so again, F, right, F statistic 3 comma 19502, what does it mean? It's just, it refers to the statistical test that's used. And in this case, it's ANOVA, which is analysis of variance, and F just stands for F statistic. The number in the parentheses, like I said, the first number indicates what's called a degree of freedom that's associated with the F statistics. So in this case, there are 3 degrees of freedom from the numerator, and the number of groups -1, right, basically. And then that 19,502 degrees of freedom in the denominator, that's basically the number of groups or individuals that were surveyed. So um, uh, where you see that equals to 3.53 after the parentheses there in the openness, this is the value of that statistic that's calculated from data. And I won't get into that. But there's a whole class on that calculation, or you can just run this on a Excel spreadsheet or some kind of statistical data software that does it all for you. But um, it's important for you to know how to calculate these by hand so you get a better understanding and intimate and connection with what the numbers really mean instead of just number crunching on software. Right, and so again, on openness, you see that P that says P less than 0.05. You probably heard of P values before. So this indicates the result of significance of a test. So P stands for probability, and in this case, it just means that the probability of observing this result or one that's even more extreme, if what's called the null hypothesis were true, is less than 0.05. So 0.05 is a common threshold that's used in statistical significance. So it's saying if the null hypothesis were true, meaning that there's no real difference between any of the groups, the result would be considered statistically significant. And that means that there's likely a difference between the groups in terms of openness. Hope you can't hear the vacuum cleaner. Oh, there it goes. So let me see if I can bring this down even further. So what it did, it showed that there's a statistical significance. I'm sorry, there's a statistically significant difference in openness between the groups, between the entrepreneurs, the managers, the supervisors, and the employees. Um, Spoiler alert, after reading the entire article, I did get good information on the statistical difference between entrepreneurs, managers, and supervisors, and relationships between them and employees. But within the employees, it seemed that um, it wasn't, um, other than they almost seemed to be at the low end of most of the characteristic traits. Um, all I can say is that I don't know what professions they were, what employees they were looking at, but just again, this study was looking at status only. It was looking at whether you're just a regular employee, whether you're a supervisor, a manager, or some kind of entrepreneur within some profession. You know what the status actually indicated about your personality, and it might have some because there was such a large sample size. um, you might see the same relevance to status just within a particular field. So, for example, employees for HTM would be the BMETs, the technicians who are actually working on the devices. And of course, we get the idea of what a supervisor is for a group of BMETs, a manager, or somebody above, and then an entrepreneur. I would call that someone who is an actual business owner, um, and or a consultant. I think a consultant would be also, I would consider that an entrepreneur. Back when I was reading the study, when it was describing the traits of an entrepreneur, uh, I I almost immediately thought more of a consultant uh, as I was reading this study, not so much a business owner, because I think they tend to act more like a manager. All right. So again, this study isn't about healthcare technology management specifically, but again, if you were to able to just if you read the article, I put a link of the article in the very first slide there, or you can just Google it. Entrepreneurs, again, I kind of saw them as consultants. So the consultants that I do know seem to have these characteristics. Some of the managers, I mean, business owners that I do know, a few have these traits, but they are like, they tend to be more like managers because they have a lot at stake that they're losing. Um, except for some traits really lined up with just even business owners and consultants because they're trying to get your business and they're like, for example, they're very, very open and agreeable because, well, they want your business. A manager, supervisors, those who work for somebody, right? Think of them as the ones you already know. Think of the ones you already know at your work and see if they fit this profile. So this is just a little. This slide here is just a little highlight overview of what the comparisons were. And I noticed I don't have employees down here. It just kind of seemed like they were the lowest and most traits, and they were kind of high in neuroticism, which is kind of a not a good thing to have. So they almost seem to have like the traits that weren't useful in some of the upper level decision making kind of positions. But entrepreneurs, for example, your business owners, your consultants, were high in openness, high in conscientiousness. They were high in extroversion, meaning they're very extroverted people. You have to be if you're a business owner, if you want business. They're very low in agreeableness and they're very low in neuroticism. So again, they don't act emotionally. They make good business decisions. And I should probably say successful entrepreneurs are low in agreeableness. If you have an entrepreneur who's very, very agreeable, they might make very bad deals and their business wouldn't last long. So but overall, entrepreneurs that were studied and surveyed, they were low in agreeableness and low in neuroticism. So they had very good emotional control and stability. Now, when we looked at managers, when the study, not we, but when the study looked at managers, out of that 19,502 that they were actually able to analyze, they were also high in openness, high in conscientiousness, they were high in extroversion, low in agreeableness and low in neuroticism. So you see the managers and entrepreneurs kind of have a very similar um, personality trait profile. Supervisors, they do mention that supervisors are higher in openness than the regular employee, but it ended up like that were like managers and entrepreneurs were higher in openness than supervisors. So uh, supervisors like right in between. So I didn't put an arrow there. Conscientiousness supervisors were very conscientious, and that just and it also means they were more conscientious than the employees. Like the regular employees seem to be kind of low in most of these, except for neuroticism. When it came to extroversion or introversion, supervisors tended to kind of be in between, right? So some of them are high or low, so they didn't really lean one way or the other. When it came to agreeableness, supervisors tended to be, again, kind of in the middle. Some were very agreeable, some were not very agreeable, so it kind of balanced out. So it seems to be a lot of variation in the supervisor, whether they're extroverted or introverted, or whether they're agreeable. But it seems like managers tend to have um, a more consistent pattern in their personality traits. And it came to neuroticism. I forgot to put the arrow there. They seem to be less neurotic than employees, but they're actually still more neurotic than like managers and entrepreneurs. So supervisors are still a bit neurotic, but again, these are because of the positions they hold. And this is what we're looking at. Where does this role, the supervisor, land uh, in the workforce, right? Because they're over employees, but they're under managers, so they're kind of getting crunched from two directions. So that some of this can make sense that we're um, that constant looking at what other people are thinking is just part of the job, and they have to be able to handle it. So maybe it's a good trait of someone who can be neurotic and take inputs from managers and inputs from employees, and they're constantly trying to balance it too. All right. So what I have here is, again, is just another clip of the introduction. It's not the entire introduction. The entire introduction is a couple of pages, so you should read it for yourself. But just so you can see what it looks like with the links. And I'm going to put a link to the actual article as well, so you can click on the article and read it for yourself. And I think if I can, I'll put a link to the actual raw data from the UK census, so you can go look up the actual raw data for yourself. But let's go ahead and dive into what the introduction actually discusses in the next few slides. All right, so I kind of put this in outline form, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it right off the slide. So what did the study do? It did a validity study, and it specifically looked at the personality, whether personality can predict employee job performance, and it's kind of one of the things we're looking at, whether um, job performance can actually predict retention or resignation in a different study that you may read about or hear about at some conference in Phoenix. So yeah, so if personality traits, does it have any validity? Does it have any connection to job performance, right? And so this particular article, oh, I hope you can't hear the vacuum cleaner. This particular article does say is a significant impact on personality traits and I should have closed the door, and job performance. So um, higher job performance overall, like openness, kind of going either way, but definitely being high in conscientiousness. Extroversion kind of go the way, so it doesn't really. In other words, if it goes either way, um, it doesn't have that big of an impact on whether you're a high performer, right? So you can be extroverted or introverted, but you can still be a high performer. You can be very open or not very open and still be a high performer. But when it comes to conscientiousness, in other words, you do what the study found is that these individuals who are high performers tended to be high in conscientiousness. Same thing with agreeableness; it kind of went up and down, so it didn't make too big of a difference, but definitely had to have low neuroticism. So if you want to look at something that was a little more like a pattern, high job performance predictors were someone who was high in conscientiousness and low in neuroticism. And it seems like openness, extroversion, and agreeableness can go either way, and you have to judge that for yourself. But let's break this down into entrepreneurs, managers, and supervisors. So an entrepreneur, we define it as an individual who is instrumental to the conception of the idea of an enterprise and its implementation. So they're very, very creative people, um, or an innovator and a catalyst of change who continuously does things that were not done before and do not fit established societal patterns. So that's an entrepreneur, someone who takes risks. Um, so again, we might want to separate this from small business owners who simply, let's say they open up a HTM service management company and they follow what's kind of been done before. They haven't actually ventured out into new markets. That's probably not the entrepreneur that's being discussed here in this by this definition. But if you were, let's say, an HTM professional and you decided to focus on something outside of our normal area, maybe you decided to go into veterinary medical technology, which is, again, that would be like a risk and it would be something unconventional. Yeah, I could see that would be a little extraordinary, a little more openness to imaginative and creative, ventures. So that type of entrepreneur. And again, consultants, I put them in there because um, they're facing a variety of different customers and problems, so they're getting called in when something is not normal and they need to actually uh, figure out something that's outside the box. So there's no pattern for something. They'll have to figure it out on the spot. So consultants are really good for that. Okay, when managers, the way that they find it, a manager is someone who sets a goal. So within an organization that's already set up, they set goals, plans, organize activities, they motivate human resources, and they control the overall procedure. So they do have a sense of control. They do need to be highly conscientious for that. I imagine that their openness probably doesn't, they don't have to be as creative because I think because they have to have control over processes, openness might not be that important for managers. So it says managers are higher level and higher paid leaders, whereas like supervisors, so the distinguishing between the two, are closer day-to-day activities to their teams to ensure managers' goals are met. And that's the reference from the book. I mean, from the article. And then they define supervisor as responsible for ensuring that the work of his or her subordinates, excuse me, is completed on time and satisfactory level of quality is exhibited. So again, from the article, this is how they define it. And an employee is the person who's actually doing the day-to-day activity that needs, gets production done. Right. Um, What else for this? So it says attraction, selection, attention model. This is the model that they used. You can look that up. B. Schneider, 1987, in an article, so you can get more information on this particular, sorry, not attention. I said attraction, selection, attrition model. Sorry about that. And so, yeah, you can look that up by B. Schneider and to get a little background information on that particular model. And it says, first, individuals are attracted to jobs commensurate with their personality traits. And then second, organizational selection procedures result in the selection of individuals with similar personalities. Scale scores for a particular job, right? So they're making sure you're a good fit. And then individuals who take jobs to which personality traits are not suited are more likely to leave their jobs. So this is one of the uh, reasons this particular research study is very useful in the great retention, the great HTM retention presentation. Okay, and so that's based on the attraction, selection, attrition model by B. Schneider. We looked at, well, the variations in the studies, right? They looked at managers and entrepreneurs being extroverted. They looked at managers as compared to, entrepreneurs as compared to managers. Oh, I'm sorry, the definition for extroversion, it's kind of small there to read, but a trait that measures the extent to which one is dominant, energetic, active, talkative, enthusiastic. So some of you might have already got that from what an extrovert is. But when we looked at entrepreneurs compared to managers, and you see the directions of the arrows here. So entrepreneurs were actually more open, less conscientious, less extroverted, less agreeable than managers. And when it came to neuroticism, they're basically the same. So that's kind of all written down here. Entrepreneurs are attracted to constantly changing environments, right? So openness is useful trait for creative environments, and managers chosen by superiors to execute and deliver directives. So these are some of the factors that kind of contributed to why they believe entrepreneurs met these personality traits as compared to managers. Not that managers aren't open; it's just that entrepreneurs tend to be more open than managers, and that just makes sense. Uh, and then managers less than entrepreneurs in conscientiousness. Um, so managers, entrepreneurs, and so specifically conscientiousness, right? Entrepreneurs are less conscientious than managers. Managers less than. Hopefully, I read that correctly. I might have the arrow the wrong way. Conscientiousness here is defined as achievement motivation plus their dependability. And it says managers and entrepreneurs are both dependable, so they both have good dependability. But entrepreneurs are exhibit more than managers at achievement and motivation. So they're greater than achievement and motivation than managers. If you can read my notes there. Hopefully my notes are clear. All right. What else? No, did it? Oh, it didn't move. Hmm. Oh, there it goes. Okay. That's it. The materials and methods, right? And this is just a snippet, so just a little image clip from the article. You can read this and the rest of the materials and methods and sample and how they collected their data, but I'll give you a little detail about all that. Right? So, like I said at the very beginning, they actually started off with 49,580 original participants. Again, this is a longitudinal study, so they needed to keep the same group over the years. And so by the end, they only had about 19,580 participants that kind of remained at the end. The analysis that was conducted, they actually wrote a script on MATLAB, if you're familiar with MATLAB. And what they did is they used the mean scores of the items that were relevant to represent each personality trait. They did a multivariate analysis, and they did a MANOVA, and then a analysis of variance. And they use that to see the effect, again, on employment status, um, uh, the effect of employment status on personality traits, like in general. So this wasn't for any particular uh, trade group or profession, right? So they did this, and um, and they looked at it uh, within employment status, and they did use some demographics as well as predictors, but I'm not going to be talking too much about the demographics. That's in the article. Um, yeah. So what ended up happening, what they ended up concluding, if you look at the tables and the raw data, and if you look at the probabilities and the statistics uh, that were calculated from the data, and the data and the tables are in the article. Basically, they came up with several large trends that were extremely consistent and reliable. So, like entrepreneurs, again, being less neurotic than the normal employee. So, your consultants, your small business owners being less neurotic than like the actual technicians. Do you think that's true for HTM? Do you think that's true for the biomeds versus like the clinical engineers and the managers? The managers had lower neuroticism scores than employees. So again, all managers as well, very low neurotic. A manager needs to be level-headed. I also said that managers were less agreeable than the supervisors and employees. So again, even though I think I mentioned at the beginning that managers, supervisors, entrepreneurs were less agreeable, managers were even less agreeable than supervisors. I mean, supervisors are a little bit more agreeable, and same thing with employees. Um, and what else? So they came up with, or they found that entrepreneurs were more open than managers, supervisors, employees. And again, some of this makes sense because if you're a small business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you don't want to be so closed-minded that you don't accept customers. You have to relate to customers. So some of these things just make sense. Like a salesperson, I would think, has to be very, very open. Um, and I'm not sure how a salesperson, if they have to be agreeable or not agreeable. Maybe not agreeable if they're trying to make sales and get the most money for a sale, right? That might make sense. But again, try to bring this back to the HTM. So the entrepreneur, the HTM business owner, the clinical engineer consultant, supposedly, if they follow the trend, they're more open. Uh, so meaning they're more imaginative, they're more willing to take on risks, they're more willing to find unique solutions or try different things for to solve a problem. Managers, they had higher openness scores than supervisors and employees, right? So managers oversee supervisors, supervisors see their employees. So it kind of seemed to go in that kind of a hierarchy. Managers are more open than supervisors, supervisors are more open than employees. When it came to conscientiousness, entrepreneurs, managers, and supervisors, they're all higher in conscientiousness over employees. Now, um, I recently talked to a company that is what's called an employee-owned company, and that particular I've asked them for they mentioned the retention numbers in their presentation, so I asked them if I could have some access to the actual percentage rates, the retention rates, and some of the raw data. They seem to be very, very excited to share that information with me. So I wanted to know whether if an organization is employee owned, does that change? Well, obviously, their results in the presentation that I sat in improved retention, but I kind of want to see if there's anything else to indicate that employees had more conscientiousness of doing a great job because they were employee owners. So they're not just employees anymore. They have a stake in the stock and whether the company does well or not. So when we say employees, I may have some information during that exchange on employee-owned businesses versus just your traditional business where you have a CEO and employees are just workers. In that particular case, employees own stock. They just got stock. It's just part of the job. Like they get it the longer they work, and they make money just for having longevity in the company. So and that definitely I would say improved retention rates. But I'll see if I can get those numbers before you all hear me again at some presentation. I don't know. What else did it say? Entrepreneurs and managers were more extroverted than supervisors and employees. Again, it seemed like the employees were they were the least motivated, the most neurotic um, of all. And what can you expect if you're dependent upon a supervisor, a manager, a director, or all the other people above you, where you're, I guess, like in today's world, your job stability is not concrete the way it used to be in the older days. So um, it seems like everything points downwards. And so we really need to know what we can do to improve the um, the needs of employees so that they will want to stay working in the organizations that they're working in. So hopefully some of this information will help you. It seems that entrepreneurs, managers, supervisors aren't doing that bad, but it does seem that from that angle, it sounds great. But if you're looking at this from an employee's perspective, it may sound like we need to rethink how we're treating our technicians. If this model actually fits our technicians as well, if it seems to have the same thing within our particular profession, we need to think twice about how or what we can do, what we can allow to kind of make them feel uh, like they have some stake, some ownership in the work that they're doing. Right? All right. So hopefully this helped. This is the article. You could read it for yourself. Again, I just kind of put out some of the major milestones and facts. I didn't really give you I may have given you an opinion here or there. Feel free to disagree with me and put it in the comments. Thank you very much. Stop recording.